and it was getting to the point where I was 16 years old. And when you're a child in care, what they did when you were 16, depending on what care system you was in, you would either be put in a flat within a home where they'd teach you about cooking and they'd teach you skills for you to go out into the big world. I never got any of that. I wasn't taught anything. And I couldn't live on £50 a week. The rent would have been more than that for somewhere to live. And then you've got bus fares, and you've got food, and then you've got bills. So a 16-year-old kid can't live on £50 a week. So I started robbing. I started doing burgling, and at this point I'd also started using harder drugs, and I just got in with the wrong people. And we were going out robbing all the time. We was now robbing cars. We were stealing cars to go find houses or buildings or warehouses to rob, anything. I seen a few people with police chases and stuff like that. They got into some serious accidents and that. So I was still robbing, but I wasn't nicking cars, and I begged my mate for months, please stop nicking cars, because I just had this bad feeling. And then one day I got my mate turn up at the door. My mate had only been gone an hour and a half. My mate turned up and said, you know, John's died, he's just dead, he's just died in a car crash. And I was like, he couldn't be, he only left here an hour and a half ago, you know. And he was like, Mike, where have you been? He thought I'd been in that crash with him and I'd got away somehow and made it back home and just left him. And I found out my mate had been in a car crash. Two of them got killed. The car they killed the two passengers, and the three guys who was in the back of the car all had broken legs, broken pelvises, and they was in hospital. But I was still stealing, and I was using more and more drugs, smoking more and more dope, and it got to a point where there was only a few people you could go to buy drugs. It's not like now. These days it's rife. You've got a drug dealer on every street or every other street. Back then there was only a handful of us. So I decided to start selling drugs. It was much easier. I tried working. The only jobs that worked out for me were cash in hand jobs. I went from making like £50 to £100 a week to making £50 or £100 in 3 hours. I was making £400 or £500 a day some days. Some weeks I'd make quite a few grand, but when I split my business I wasn't making as much. But I was never a greedy person. I used to walk around with pockets full of money, like £1,000 in this pocket, half a 9 bar in the other pocket, and I was generous, you know. Anybody, if we went out for a drink, I'd pay for drinks. We were drinking champagne, just having a mad lifestyle, going restaurants for meals on dodgy credit cards and all kinds of stuff. And to me, selling drugs was an easy option. I wasn't going out robbing. I wasn't putting myself at risk from being caught doing anything like that. And the best thing about it was the people, they were coming to me, and I didn't have to do anything. I'd just sit at home and they'd come to me. I'd sell them a bit of cannabis, and like I say, I was making really good money. Just to be in with the in crowd again, all these guys were going raving, having a really good time. We was hearing about these rave parties, and they was all like underground at first and secret. So to me it was kind of like interesting, you know, whoa, what's this all about? So I went to my first rave, took my first pill, had the best night of my life. I was like, tried amphetamine for the first time, and I was like, wow, this is amazing, and I felt good. Drugs started to make me feel good about myself. I was selling drugs all the time. I had so much money. I never wanted for anything, and I felt really good. And that lifestyle went on till I was like 21, and it got deeper and deeper. The guy who had originally set me up to be robbed, him and several lads came round, kicked the back door through, basically came in with a sawn off shotgun and put it at my head. I had a lot of problems, you know, mental health problems, and stuff that I weren't addressing, I'd ignore it. And I was also resentful from being in care, being abused. All I'd seen authority do was basically hold me back or just punish me. That's all he ever wanted to do. When he found out I'd never tried a pipe, it was his mission and that he wanted me to try a pipe. So every time I smoked with these guys, he'd go on and on and on about it. So in the end I says, look, if I have a hit on a pipe, will you shut up? Will you just leave me alone? And he was like, yeah, just try it. First hit I had, a crack. I've kept the pipe, I'm holding it like this, and they're all laughing, and my mate's gone, you're supposed to pass the pipe on? And I was like, you're going to have to wait, I'm having a second hit of crack. And like, my mate's pissed off because he's waiting for his hit. And this other guy who's taught me into using it, he's absolutely cracking up, he thinks it's funny. And I was that close to opening my own business, and all the money I had to use to open this business, I remember sitting there after 3 months, and this guy is having a go at me saying, when are you going to pay me? Because I owed him 600 quid. I went from having thousands of pounds to nothing. I was so paranoid. I was smoking so much crack that I couldn't even keep my operation going with the growing, so I had to stop that. I sold my car off. Everything I had, I sold off and sold off. And at this point, I ended up starting to use heroin. I remember being around his house, well, his flat one night, and I used to take temazepam to come down, and I got into pills like temazepam and diazepam and benzos just to come down off the crack. But this one time I didn't have none of these tablets, and my mate's sitting there and he's smoking heroin on foil, and he knew I wouldn't smoke the heroin, so what he did was he got the crack pipe, proper glass pipe, he's loaded it up with ash, he's put heroin on top, and then he's put a £10 hit of crack on top of it, and he's passed me the pipe. I'm not looking at the heroin, I'm just looking at the crack. I want the crack, but I don't want the brown, but I know I've got to smoke it if I want the other. So that's how he got me into heroin. So I've smoked this pipe, and he said to me, how'd you feel? I just melted into the settee. It was one of the first times in my life that I felt nice, I felt normal. I mean, how can you take a drug of that degree and feel normal? So it gives you an idea of how messed up my life was, how messed up my mental health was. And I started, obviously, lost everything to these drugs, and I started living on the streets. I admit it, I was in tears the first time I went in. I wasn't used to a hostel, I wasn't used to being homeless. You know, I used to be like a big man with a reputation and thousands of pounds, and all of a sudden I've got nothing, and I'm living in a hostel, and all I've got is a bin liner with my clothes in it. So anyway, these two guys have asked me, can you get us any gear, can you score for us? And I'm cold turkey, I'm rattling, I'd have done anything. I was like, yeah, I can get you some gear. So all I've done is ring a dealer up. The dealer's turned up, gave them the gear, and we've gone to the park to use. And as we're injecting this drug, the guy next to me, he collapses and turns purple. The other guy, he went all weird, started sweating, and I said to him, sit down on the bench, and he collapsed in front of me. I ran to the phone box, rang an ambulance, went back to where, near the, I didn't go straight back to the scene, but I stood just away from it, and I seen the ambulance turn up, and then I thought, well, I've done what I can, you know, I've got the guy help. The guy was already dead by the time I left the park. He was gone. He was purple. 28 years old. One of the guys lived. He had a heart attack though, from taking the gear. The other guy died, and I remember waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning with 10 policemen rushing into my bedroom, flick the light on. I woke up, I've got a needle by my bed for my first shot of the morning. I've grabbed that and shot it all over the floor. I've been arrested, took to the police station. What had happened was, these guys have been took to hospital, one of them's dead, the other guy who was he was unconscious, but they've gave him like naltrexone shots or whatever it is, brought him back round. He's woke up handcuffed to a bed. He's only in his 50s, but he suffers with mental health and he's got like learning difficulties. So the police have basically coerced him into making up this story and wrote saying that I was taking money off him, using it for myself for drugs, giving him little bits. I was a bully. And the guy was so scared because the police said, if you don't tell us what happened, we're going to charge you with murder. And the guy was really scared because they told him, your mate's dead. As far as we're concerned, it's murder. Because he had learning difficulties, straight away he's like, I'll tell you everything. And he's made everything look bad towards me. And when I got arrested, I told the police. He came to me. You know, I didn't go to him, and it hit the news. It was central, all over the UK, went nationwide in the end, and everybody knew about it. And this was the first time that I've been sent to prison, and like for real, for proper. So I couldn't believe it. So after several months of going to court, being in prison, I went up for sentencing. The first sentence I ever received was 3 years and 3 years concurrent. I was just lucky that the 3 years was run concurrent with the 3 years that I was given. Otherwise I would have had to have served 6 years. So back then, you did like, unless it was 5 years plus, you do half a sentence like it is now. But if you get 10 years or more, it's 3/4. But because this was only under the 5 year mark, I only had to do half of it. I did lose time in prison. First time in prison, I've made myself a shank, and I'm thinking someone's going to come for me, I'm going to have to shank them, and I've got caught with it. I learned a lot. I got to meet criminals who were bigger than me, who you know, were well known. I got in with like, I get on with everyone, you know, I'm an easygoing person, but I started to make bigger contacts and like meet bigger people, like drug smugglers and people who were doing like bigger crimes and stuff. And I did my 3 year in prison, and when I got out, I did really well for months, but I'd always suffered with my mental health, but I'd never done anything about it. And because I'd left it for so long, by this time I was institutionalised.